Hello everyone and welcome back to my Let's Play Minecraft Magically Modded series. I finished building the silverwood and silverleaf tree cage, and I've also added two of these on the other side, vis condensers with an efficiency and dark upgrade to pump the taint that leaks out back into here to some filters and release it back into this chunk. There's two on each side, and I've been producing a whole bunch of taint crystals. I've also added this, which is just a normal cauldron, so I can dump stuff in here to have it just go straight into the atmosphere. That's how I have been increasing the taint in this chunk. I had it up to 12,000 by going to the blaze farm and dumping a bunch of blaze rods in here. Unfortunately, it leaks out very quickly. You can see there's only about 2,500 taint left. I had this whole thing covered in the blue goo stuff, but it's decayed back now while I was out of the area. I have a plan to fix that, but we're going to need some more taint crystals and some other stuff. So while I breed this, get more crystals, we're going to go do some other stuff. I'll be back in a minute. I'm back and we're in the nether. Today we're going to start on the tunnel boring machine that I mentioned several episodes ago in a short segment. So what I plan on doing is building it using frames, and for the digging using the arcane bore. The arcane bore can have 5 sizes of holes: 9 by 9, 5 by 5, and 3 by 3. So I have a set of minimum requirements. I want a machine that will fit through a 5 by 5 hole, and power for up to 1,000 blocks. That's a frames power. Then I have a set of desired requirements. This is the absolute minimum for me to consider it functional. This is things that I really would like it to do. Like a machine that would fit through a 3 by 3 hole and fit vertically through a 9 by 9 hole. Self-contained power generation, that using thermopiles or something like that. First, I should mention how I plan on building this is using a set of railroad cars. So we'll have, based on these requirements, we'll have something that's 5 wide by 5 tall by 9 long for each railroad car. And then to go vertically, you'll separate the cars and they'll go down. So the plan is you would dig a 9 by 9 hole straight down to the level you want to dig the tunnel, then separate the cars and move each car down vertically at a time, and then reconnect the cars at the bottom. That's the original plan, or the current plan, whatever. So we'll have, say, a tunnel boring car, then we'll have a power generation car, then we'll have a tunnel lining car. What that means is, say you've dug a tunnel through, but there's ores and stuff in it. Well, something that will dig out the walls of the tunnel and replace them with a desired block, or using, what are they called? I forgot the name. Using a RedPower 2 computer and where's that block? These assemblers, which can deploy different blocks to they connect to a bundle cable, and we're able to pull a different block spaced on. We just use TMI to show you that. The interface will make it simpler. There. So you connect a bundle cable here, and you can have different colored blocks for each signal. So if I wanted like glass and grass, I'd have like grass lighting for the bottom and glass for the sides or something like that, or grass for 8 blocks and 1 piece of glass, and grass for 8 blocks, 1 piece of glass, something like that. Hook that to computer, and I could do some advanced patterns with that. That is what I mean for the tunnel lining car. What else do we have? The onboard computer. So the computer will probably be a separate car, maybe some kind of pilot car or something like that, that is interconnected with all the other cars. It controls everything so it works together properly. I want it to have a onboard processing facility. Means something that will take the stuff that the arcane borer mines up and process it, what can be processed locally, or either say send it to a void chest and send it off to be processed, something like that. Something that, say I wanted to line the tunnel with stone bricks, I'd have something that would smelt the stones and then craft them into stone bricks that way. Next up, I want it to be as fast as possible, obviously, and I want it to be able to turn without much intervention from me. That is to say, without having to completely rebuild it. Ideally, I would have nothing more than having to realign the arcane borer. Also, a pump car. A car for if I run across a pool of lava or something, I would like to be able to pump it up and send it somewhere. Or maybe carry it with me in a different kind of tank car of some kind. Or, say, a car that would hold the liquid and you could not be actually attached to the train but send it off somewhere else to be pumped elsewhere. Kind of a tanker truck type thing. Tanker rail cart. That's the general plan. Today we're going to work mostly on the drilling part. I'm going to break this up over several episodes so I don't get quite so burnt out trying to figure it all out at once. I don't think I can put all that in one episode at least. And I'm also probably going to do a bit more in creative than I had originally planned, mostly because the elevator uses so much redstone. I don't have a lot right now. So we'll go over to creative mode and start on working on the drivetrain mostly. Speed is going to be an important consideration. Mostly, how do I want it to work? I'll discuss that as I'm building. So I'll meet you in the creative world. The first thing we need to do is to build the 9x5 platform to put the frame motors on, and then to cover it with covers where we don't want it to connect and panels where we do want it to connect. Once we have done that, we are ready to place the frame motors. All frame contraptions that move themselves operate under the same general principle. Basically, a frame motor can not move itself. So you need a primary frame motor to move the mother frame, and a secondary frame motor to move the primary frame motor. with a frame that's connected to only the secondary, well, it's not connected to the secondary frame motor, it's connected to the primary frame motor and not to the mother frame. Then you have the secondary frame motor connected to the primary frame, so that when the primary frame moves, it does not move the secondary frame. It slides the secondary frame over the secondary motor, and then you need to power the secondary frame motor to push the secondary frame and the primary frame motor back into its original position. Then doing that in a loop, you'll get a kind of inchworm drive. It's not very fast, but it does work. Originally, I was going to try to have a distance of more than 1 between the primary and secondary frame motors, as I know from my elevator test that would make it go a bit faster, not having the delay between the two. Unfortunately, that did not work out quite so well, so we do something else by just having a single gap. Also, a problem with that original plan was the size. Once I've got something that works in principle, the hard part now is just figuring out how to do the circuitry. There's a few different ways you could do this, but what I want is something that can essentially reset itself. And to return to the original position when it's turned off. The problem I'm having with that is that I'm going to have to turn off the timer to stop the motor, and it might not always reset if the secondary motor is low on power and it takes a second to recharge if I use the repeater like I had. So I need to come up with something a little bit different for that. Trying a few different things here. Timer for the primary motor connected to a toggle latch is the primary power source. Then, after a bit of effort and trial and error, I come up with this, which is to have a toggle latch hooked up to the secondary frame and a piece of wire on the secondary frame motor, so that when the secondary frame is over the secondary frame motor, it automatically powers itself. And that will reset the engine automatically even if the motor runs out of power. Now then, I have to come up with some way to make this move in more than one direction. That is going to be a bit more difficult because, like I have mentioned before, the secondary frames are not connected to the primary frames, so they're going to move independently. I have to fiddle with that for a little bit until I eventually decide just to have just to turn the primary frame motor back and forth and have that change directions instead of having to try to have two primary frames or two primary motors for each direction. So this way I only have one secondary frame. I attempted to have a deployer using a sonic screwdriver to turn the frame motor automatically. Unfortunately, that did not work out quite so well Not that the idea wasn't sound, it's just that it took far too much space. There wasn't enough room for the power wiring. So once I've tried that with a button here, I see that it works, but if I run it continuously, the motor will reach a point where it doesn't have any power, and it's not connected to a blue alloy wire, so there's no way for it to get power. So we're pretty much stalled there, since the deployer is where we need the power to be. Because if you look at it, you need a side for the red alloy wire to connect to, a side for the power to connect to, a side for the secondary frame to connect to, a side for the primary frame to connect to, and finally a space on two sides for the direction that it moves forward and back. So that leaves nowhere for it to move at all, or nowhere to put the deployer, because that is all six sides taken up. Another thing that I try is to come up with some kind of automatic coupling and decoupling system to work between the rail cars by having a block breaker to break a designated connector block that's not covered with a panel but is just open, so that if it's up against another frame, it will connect to and pull it along or drag it along and push it depending on which way it's going. And then a deployer to deploy that same frame if I want it to connect. Ideally, I could push a button and have that either connect or disconnect depending on what its current state is. Fortunately, that didn't turn out all that well, both because of how much space it takes up and because the button was lasting too long. I could have used a pulse former, but I'm not entirely sure that would have worked either. I think it probably has something to do with the order the blocks update. So the deployer was deploying before the block breaker was block breaking, and it was just a loop. So after I finished that, I try something, which is to work on the power cart. I've changed the size of the engine to be 5x5 now, and also having the power cart to be 5x5 as well. That way it can go in either direction, or in any of the three directions I want without having to actually be turned. As because the frame power, the motor area, I guess, is turning out larger than I had originally hoped. Originally, I was going to put a motor on every single cart, but that's not going to be practical now because the motor is taking up way too much space. So first, I need to do a few tests to see how much power I can get out of different configurations. I really don't want to use liquid, so I'm trying something with torches and snow first. That is my original plan, to see how much power I can get from that compared to how much you get from a solar panel. Another option was to use fire, but I ruled that out because you actually need 2 blocks for fire. So we have this design for the power cart, which is to have 4 thermopiles with alternating snow and torches. Unfortunately, that isn't producing very much power compared to a solar panel, and not near enough to power the entire frame motor just with this connected. And it's going to need even more power than it's currently using when it's finished, because the amount of power it needs is based on how many frames you are moving. Once I've fiddled with that a little bit, I decided to try something a bit different and use a stack of thermopiles to further increase the power. That improves things slightly, but it's still not quite enough for the amount of power I'm using. Thermopile's not a very good power source compared to the energy requirements that I have. So another thing I'm trying is to use lava and snow, but that of course melts the snow and you get lava and water very soon. But lava and water produces a lot more power and is a bit more stable. Once I have that set up, I need to come up with a way to connect them all together, because that white insulated wire is supposed to be a placeholder for a bundle cable that's going to connect to the engine car. So what I come up with is to use bat boxes in the place of wire, and just have a kind of network of those surrounding around. There still is one problem that I haven't solved, which is that this needs to be somewhat symmetrical so that it can go in either direction without, say, with where the bundle cable and power cable will still connect in the right spots in the adjoining cars. Right now I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but it's probably going to end up being something vertical in the sides. Say the bottom layer being all wire and the layer above that being all insulated bundle cable or something like that. Though I will need to look at that to see if I can fit it in with the bat boxes, how they are now. So once I've done that, I have something that works fairly well as just an engine and a power source, but you're still not producing enough power for continuously running the frame. So this is what I have come up with for the somewhat final design. You need to have this charged before you go underground if you want it to last a while. I'm not sure, I may need more of these power cars, because I need to build the actual boring car and see how long it takes, as this won't be moving while the boring is going, so it could be recharging during that time. I really need to figure out the ratio of time it's standing still to time it's moving, see if I have enough power generation at the moment. But right now, I just have power cables like this, with some temporary blocks here for the booster charge, and some extra bat boxes here for a little extra boost in charge. So if I get rid of these extra blocks, see how I have this set up. Instead of having the wire coming to connect to these on this side, I have the bat boxes go around here, which transfers power from here to here. Then this transfers power from here to this side. And then the wire can just run along this side. So it pulls all the power from all the thermopiles just from this side. And I've also got a kind of connection system here. Either one of these blocks can be broken to separate these two carts. So right now they're connected and run along. But let's see. If I going the other way now, if I break this, either one of these, it'll just separate off nicely, which is a pretty easy way for me to separate off the carts without having to do a great deal of work. And then I can just place this back and run them back together, and they'll be connected again. So it's just a test for the connection system. I'm going to have to do something a little different. Probably have the connector lock like right here when it's all said and done. And only on certain blocks. Like here it wouldn't, or here it wouldn't work because we need something there to connect to this, but here it would be fine. We'd have to have one on all four sides for that. Something I need to work on the next time I do this is going to be the changing of directions. Either that or just the actual boring through. The actual drill car. I'm thinking I'm probably going to have a motor on each end for the turning part. That's something I'll get into the next time I work on this. But that's going to be it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.